So I have this feeling that this presentation is going to work till the end. I'm using open source in my laptop, so hey, open source is our technology. So thank you very much, Dennis, for the introduction. My name is Izquierdo. I'm one of the founders of Bitergia. We are a startup based in Madrid. We are running back. We've been in the business for the last 7 years, a bit more maybe. For those that ask about the presentation, so you don't really need to take notes, everything, you can use this publicly and so on, you can tweet and blah, 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 and you can find the presentation in speakerdeck.com/Bitergia, so I guess it should be the first one you see there. That's my Twitter, Izquierdo. Yeah, so a bit about Bitergia. So what we do, or what you see at the very end, are dashboards. So we are producing metrics about open source offices, InnerSource offices, basically any kind of software development that you can think of. So we are supporting 30 different data sources, and everything is open source, so you can use this and so on. Just a quick view about, so how do you do business, what are you doing here? So Bitergia is using this remote lab toolchain, which is part of Chaos project. Chaos is a Linux Foundation project, community health analytics for open source software. So we are the main developers of this project, and then we are having consultancy and metrics strategy and all of this on top of this. So this is a bit about Bitergia. So why am I here today discussing about maturity models? Well, like in Stuttgart, so a couple of years ago, year and a half, I had the opportunity to work with a couple of companies from Spain, and we were discussing about how to measure all of this. And then what's the purpose of having a maturity model in InnerSource or perhaps in any kind of industry? So we realized that there are kind of 3 main purposes, and some people mentioned some of these during today. Basically, industrialization as an automated way of doing things, so it's easier basically if we get a straight line where we all work in the same way with the same tools, etc., etc. Homogeneous way of development in the same way that we are defining, and this is a way that we are trying. This is a problem that we are trying to solve as well at InnerSource.com, right? This kind of islands of technology that each of the agile teams I have at home are using their own things because this is how they started from the beginning, but then at the very end what we have is a big amount of people using a big amount of different tools of how to fix this. So how can we be faster to market, right? So trying to be more homogeneous is part of these maturity models. And then self-measurement, I think this was done by Tom before, which is kind of hey, I can self-improve so I can see myself in this model somehow. So this is perhaps some of the purposes for maturity models. And then we have this kind of things where companies are asking other companies to be certified in certain levels, and well, all of this stuff around. If we go to the open source ecosystem, these are part of the existing open source methodologies, at least a year ago in Wikipedia. Indeed, I've been involved in some of them as the QALOS, which is around quality of open source. This is a mix of methods, quality models, and so on, but it's all about open source, so what's going on with InnerSource. And with this, Ras, that I don't see you now. There, thank you. So he's been working on this idea and conceptualization of maturity models, and there are other people with certain interests, and we had really good and interesting discussion there back in Stuttgart. So based on the previous discussion that we had there was basically the questions we had were, do you know where you are at your InnerSource journey? So there are some people saying, well, we are at the very beginning, or we've been in this InnerSource thing for the last 5 years. But do you know how far you want to go in this InnerSource thing? Do you want to be like ASF, Apache Software Foundation? Do you want to be like, I don't know, you want to improve in any of these steps? So maturity models are useful for these kind of things, to first understand where you are, and then second, to see where you want to be, right? So it's this ASCII and to be that you can think of. So, well, how long this is taking, or how can we have a more objective way of dealing with this problem? So this is all we were discussing there back in Stuttgart. So the goal of all of this that we had in mind was to evaluate how mature the development practices are in any organization here or any organization around the world. And then basically somehow create a high-level guide that could be useful for anyone. We were having some discussion there as at the level of developers, it might be useful for self-improvement, understand if I'm being transparent enough, or if I'm being collaborative enough or communicative enough, right? At the chief level, perhaps if we go for upper management, this is useful to show, hey, we are in our inner source journey right here, but then we can walk all of this path, and then we can start doing estimations about moving from one step to the other, right? Some of the process areas that we were discussing at that point, these are based mainly on Jean-Jacques' presentation by the InnerSource principles. You can agree or disagree, but those were basically culture, transparency, collaboration, community, and meritocracy. We took transparency, collaboration, and community, and we assume in this maturity model that we created that culture is kind of a cross concept, and meritocracy is kind of a similar thing in this case. And then we went for certain maturity levels, which were pretty similar to this maturity model presented by VC. We have accidental, exploration, adoption, and efficient, right? So basically what we have, other areas might be in the process as well, but what we have at the very end is a table like this. So we have certain areas which are transparency, collaboration, and community, and then we can measure in somehow how mature this is. Okay, so this is a maturity model, nothing else. Probably we need to have some more discussion in the first part, so here in the key areas, but this is what we produced at that point. To bring some more context, part of this work was delivered to a customer we were working for, so this has a work of 3 companies for this, and then this large corporation there in Spain. An example of the things we were working at is, so for the maturity model, transparency, and we work basically at the level accidental. It's something that may happen or may not. And then you can go for things like, we were working at certain areas in this case, as plans, products, development process and tools, decisions, helpful resources, or stories. So we were defining this. And then for each of them, we were looking for ways of defining this. How can I define maturity in this case? So if we go for an accidental thing of for transparency, basically individuals or team are not used to disclose plans, so basically they don't care, they are working in a silo mode, they are working together, it's perfect, and this is working for them. Then if we go for the development process, these are just examples, so I'm not trying to have a complete picture here of what we produce. So then we can have each team follows its own development process, so this concept of island of knowledge, island of technologies, that indeed we were discussing in Galway as a new pattern. Then decisions, basically those decisions are done without any kind of explanation and so on. It's right here, if you see these strings between brackets, those are kind of patterns that they exist at the InnerSource pattern, so you can go over and say, okay, how can I fix this idea about making decisions and involve management and developers here? So in this case, we have the review committee, and this is at the InnerSource pattern, so you can go look for it. Helpful resources, so we have no shared activity, no shared contributions or stories, where basically people are not saying anything at all. If we go to the other extreme, which is level 3, then we have we see standards, right? So we have a standard way to produce code. We have a standard way to start collaborating, to communicate with our peers. We have a code review process, CI/CD in the development process, right? So there are, we have people feeling that they are part of the process, right? So it's like we move from the accidental way of doing things to the extreme, which is, hey, we are working as in the ASF, so we have a lot of tools, we have a lot of processes, we have a lot of engagement by the people, right? Okay, but these are kind of the steps. The problem now would be, okay, this is great, so we have this maturity model in place. How can I start with this? How to assess where we are? I was thinking about this, and I saw like 3 main areas that might be provide input for this model. The first one is interviews and surveys to the people, so to understand their perception, what they think, what they feel about how they are working nowadays. Then quantitative approach in terms of directly going to the repositories and understanding what's going on, if there are business units collaborating with other business units and so on. Because one of the recommendations I can give you is don't trust your developers, because they say, hey, we are following this process, but that doesn't happen. This is not that usual, right? So the point is, it's true we have this process in place, but if you go and check what's going on, it may happen, based on my experience, like 50-60% of the times. So basically the code review process or the process in the backtracking system or similar stuff, all of these processes that are defined, they are followed in somehow, okay? So that's it. So going to the data and having real data make basically you have facts. So this is happening, right? And then infrastructure assessment in the sense of what we've been talking about people, we've been talking about process, and now the tools, right? So we need proper tools, and we've seen some examples today, and we'll see some examples tomorrow. And we need that those tools are accessible. They need to have right access. We need those tools to be kind of research friendly in the sense of APIs and so on, so you can retrieve data and understand what's going on. I remember a conversation yesterday about having invasive information from development. Well, we shouldn't use probably that word, but it's we can have a fair use of the data that we already have, right? Yeah, I mentioned potential stakeholders for the qualitative approach would be developers, middle managers, chief level. So we need to go for them. We need to ask for feedback, and then we need to give the feedback back to them so they understand what's going on. And these in-depth interviews have been useful, so you understand what people feel basically. This is again based on experience. For the quantitative approach, one of the recommendations, or the kind of things we typically use, and we are using this in the chaos community as well, is called question metric approach. So it's a good practice to have all of your data in the same place, centralized, but don't try to measure everything. So you need to have the metrics that you really need to understand where you're going according to your business goals. So the first thing you need to understand is what's your mission, or how are you going to be tracked by your bosses, or what do you need to report, or what are your business goals, right? So based on these business goals, then we can start creating a hierarchy of questions for those business goals, and then we will define a set of metrics for each of them, right? So then we have, at the very end of our journey, proper metrics that we'll define, that will help to answer all of these business goals. And then, of course, business goals evolve, so in the same way they evolve, so we may have new questions, new metrics, okay? And then some strategy around having this plan, do, check, act, where basically you need to define policies, I know, to foster collaboration, for instance. So once you have those policies in place, you need to understand if this is currently working, right? So you need to check. So you need basically to plan the policy, you need to put in place the policy, you need to check if this is working, and if this is working or not, then you need to go again and define or improve or tune a bit what you decided. Okay? And then infrastructure basically is about how InnerSource, or how friendly InnerSource your infrastructure is. So again, it's about having the right tools for the right processes and the people. So coming back to the discussion about maturity models. So we have these bars here. So what we want to have, this is what we are right now, these gray bars here, and then the white ones is what we want to be, right? So then we have a clear picture of what we want to achieve. That's all. This is a maturity model, okay? Some key things. So we have defined maturity model. We have defined how to assess, so where we are. We still need to define how to move from one maturity level to the next one, right? So basically for this we need to define metrics. And for those, this is kind of the discussion I had before about the goal question metric approach. This is part of the Daniel's reference this morning about the InnerSource book. It's about metric strategy and so on. So the slides are public, so don't worry about having the long URL. But this is a simple example about, let's say, engagement. So we may have engagement, and this is kind of thing we can sit down and define together. So the point here is that if we go for engagement is about how good your project is about attracting new people, how good your project is about retaining developers, and then we can start defining thresholds or KPIs or so. So in this case, if we go for engagement and we go for level 0 accidental, and the KPIs we may go for the number of newcomers, for the retention rate, or for the people leaving. Okay, and in this case, I think this is a bug. In any case, would be newcomers, so we have less than newcomers. Then we have a retention rate of less than 3 months, and then we have like a 90% of our people after a certain amount of time is leaving my community, is leaving my project, coming from another business unit. So this is a way of defining those metrics and those thresholds. So then basically you jump from one to the other. Then you have some other analysis here, and basically it's again, if we have the data, so we can sit down and discuss about the proper things we need to discuss, which is what are the thresholds we should be using here? Are our policies in trying to improve collaboration or whatever working at all or not? So for this we need metrics, and then thanks to these metrics we'll be able to move from one step to the other in the maturity model. So there are some other things. So we've been discussing about the qualitative approach, the quantitative approach for doing the maturity assessment, but there are some other things. So we have the InnerSource checklist, which was a book written by Silona Wongwold. She's not here today. I think maybe she may come tomorrow. But it's a great thing, so please have a look at this, and it's gonna focus and structure your way of thinking about InnerSource and doing things really well. And then we have the patterns as well for improving the maturity of your processes, because patterns is about providing proven solutions to existing problems that we can share all together. The earlier you start thinking about patterns and characterizing your internal problems in this way, the better, because then this is a common language we all have in the community, and then we can start sharing experiences around. Okay? So there are a lot of things around this maturity assessment. So then I have this what if thing. What if in the community we are able to define a common and generic maturity model? So we start all talking and using the same vocabulary. We all think in the same way. I'm not saying that this maturity model is going to be applied in the same way in all of the companies here, but kind of having a framework. So kind of having an agreement, and then we say, okay, this is useful. Then let's see how can I take this and apply this internally in my company. Okay. So so this is like a class. We need to instantiate that class. Then I would say we need to keep advancing a common way of defining metrics. And for this, we have a talk tomorrow together with Anna, a colleague from Bitergia, about lessons learned from the chaos community somehow, which is about basically metrics and software about metrics and so on. So the idea is how to bring together both communities. So happy to see you tomorrow. I would say keep advancing in new patterns to deal at each maturity model. So it would be great. Then something we didn't do when we were in Stuttgart was to release the maturity model. So this is something I'm gonna do right now. So it's open source. So I have this here. Copy this here. I'm gonna open this as an issue at InnerSource patterns because I have no better place. We preview this, it seems it's working. Yeah. So, yeah. Yes, publish. Is the ticket 116? is all basically. The only thing from our point of view is remember that we cannot improve what we cannot measure. So to measure is to know. Yeah. This is all. Questions, comments, concerns? Was this that boring? You need coffee? I don't know. So, question for you. Is anyone trying to apply a maturity model internally or doing something similar? So there are some people around. So it would be good if it's possible to share experiences. It would be probably something to do together, I guess. To build something together. Extra comments? No? I don't know. So this is a work done by these three companies, Spanish companies in this case. And then after this, we had the opportunity to work with this large corporation in Spain. We all validated this. So this might be useful for these four companies. I don't know about your company. So it's something we can definitely discuss about. Again? So what I just released is the maturity model as it is. The discussion that we need to have right now would be, so the gaps that we have are probably definition of the metrics between both basically the several steps, how to define them, probably the metrics because the thresholds will be dependent on your organization. Then surveys and interviews for developers, middle managers and chief level to understand where you are right now. And then with these two main areas, I would say this would be quite complete. But at least we have like the framework to start discussing about. I'm afraid that the questions that we had for this customer in this case were too specific, and that was all. Thank you for the question.